All right. Okay. Assalamualaikum and a very good evening. I be to all of you. So today we'll be doing on a. Oh, okay. I'm gonna share my screen. All right. Don't worry, Zahra, because the session is recorded. You will always find the first half. You can always find the first half, the chunks of the presentation that you didn't manage to follow in the eCampus, uploaded in eCampus. Okay. Oh, speaking of Zahra, not Zahra. Sorry. Oh, Zahra. All right. Hi, Zahra. Okay. All right, we have just beginning with by recording the session. Okay, so I've already shared my screen. All right, so today we'll be doing on a topic called finding and using negotiation power. All right, so when we talk about negotiating, okay, usually we know that in certain parts of negotiation process, we're gonna practice um, a certain amount, just a small amount of power towards the transaction or the process that we are currently conducting, which is the negotiation process. Okay, in terms of the term itself, power is actually quite close in relation to influence as well. So by accessing power doesn't mean that you are being, let's say, monopolizing or you are monopolizing or manipulating the session, but actually you are practicing influence, okay, towards the other party and also towards the process of negotiating. All right. So how would you find and also use the negotiation power in your transaction? Okay. So why is it that power is very important to negotiators? Right, we don't know that most negotiators they believe that power is important because it gives one negotiator, a particular person, an advantage over the other party. Right, meaning to say in a very simple term, a person which is influential, all right, will gain more rather than a person which is less influential. So this particular assumption arises from one of two perceptions. So there are two perceptions. So it can be practiced both, or it can be chosen either one of the perception, which is number one, the negotiator. They believe he or she currently has less power than the other party. So in this particular assumption, you yourself as a negotiator, you think that you have less power than the party that you are negotiating with. Right. So for example, you are buying a condo. All right. So the seller of the condo, you think that you are not in the position of winning, or you are not in the position of getting a preferable outcome, right, towards what you want. All right. It is more of towards what the seller wanted, or it can be vice versa. If you're a seller, maybe you think that you are in a position of losing a bit, and the buyer is in a position of gaining or getting the most satisfied outcome out of this process. So in this situation, he or she believe the other party already has some advantage that can and will be used, right, towards you. So he and she seeks power to offset or counterbalance the other's advantage. So you will tend, all right, to seek for power in order to counteract, all right, in order to counteract or in order to balance, okay, balance the power or the influence that you have in that particular negotiation. Okay, for example, this particular person is highly knowledgeable in terms of property, whereas this is you buying your first house. So with that particular assumption, you know that okay, she's in a huge advantage over me because she knows a lot about property, whereas I'm just a normal person, all right, with my let's say medium paid job and trying to get my first house, for example. So you will try to find or offset a particular we can say as platform or a particular points where you can think that you can counterbalance, okay, the power and also advantages between you and also the seller. All right, so in counterbalancing this act, sometimes you, for example, will seek for information yourself, or maybe you can get people who are also experts like your family or friends who are also experts in property to come along with you and negotiate. Or maybe you can find what you call it, weaknesses or disadvantage point of the house that you are buying, so that you can try to put out the point, right? You can save it as your bullet, and then you can lay out the bullet when the times come for you to get the price that you desire. Sorry. Assumption number two is when the negotiator believe he or she needs more power than the other party to increase the probability of securing a desired outcome. All right. Maybe although you are having less power, or sometimes you are actually gaining advantage or having more influence than power than the other person, but still you think that you need to increase that power and influence for you to get a desired outcome out of this negotiation process. So in this context, he or she believe that added power is necessary to gain or sustain his own advantage in the upcoming negotiation. So you do believe that added power will help to give more advantage, to give more influence towards you in obtaining the desired outcome that you wanted. Okay. So in negotiating, all right, or in the negotiation process, you will have certain, alhamdulillah, you will be utilizing certain tactics, and also you will have motive in doing so. All right. So tactics can be described as tactics is designed to enhance negotiators' own power or to diminish the other's power and to create a state of either power equalization. So you can use tactics in order to increase your own power, get rid of the power of the get rid not get rid just reduce the power of the party that you are negotiating with, or if you trying to be ethical, or you think this is a very balanced and fair kind of transaction, you will try to create a state of either power equalization whereby both parties have relatively equal or countervailing power. All right, or power difference, whereby you do believe that one's power is greater than the others. It's either you trying to be fair, or either you trying to express or exercise more power and influence towards the person or the party that you are negotiating with, right? So negotiators who have less concern about power, they are assumed to have the ability to achieve greater ease towards a mutually satisfying and acceptable outcome. All right. So if you do believe, or if you are not that concerned about power and influence, most of the time you can get the outcome which is mutually satisfying easily. But then in contrast or in opposing to that, okay, if you are a negotiator who do care about power, all right, you will seek to match or exceed the other party's power. All right, you will try to seek for solution that either uh, how to say this, that either they will not lose or dominate the negotiation, meaning that either both of the parties, some will be losing, some will be gaining a lot, not losing like in terms of losing the house like freely, but losing in terms of not getting their desired outcome. Okay. And then the motive question, all right, the motive for your intention will be relating to why negotiator is using this kind of tactics. All right. So there are usually two major reasons. Number one, you want to create power differences as a way to gain advantage, or you want to block the other party's power move. All right. So such tactics will enhance the capacity for one side to dominate the relationship, paving the way for a competing or dominating strategy and also a distributive agreement. Okay. Whereas number two, to create power equalization as a way to level the playing field. So the goal is to minimize either side's ability to dominate the relationship, and this will lay the groundwork for moving discussion towards a compromising or collaborative integrative agreement. So it's either you want to be more powerful, more influential, and get your desired outcome regardless of what the other party wanted to get, or you want to create power equalization whereby you want to have what you call that, a very um, compromising, a very balanced kind of relationship in achieving collaborative and also integrative agreement. Okay. Right. So how do negotiators define power? All right. So power can be defined as the ability to bring about outcomes they desire or you desire, or the ability to get things done the way them to be done, all right? The way they want them to be done, or the way you want the things to be done. So when you have power, or when you define power, you know that you have the desire to get an outcome that you wanted, and also you want to get things the way you want it to be, right? By Sarachi and Pfeiffer 1977. So presumably a party with power, right? If you are in a party, or if you are in a position where you have power and influence, you can induce another to do what the latter otherwise would not do. Right? By Dahl 1957. That is having power over another person. So in other terms, if you have power over another person, you can always get them to do things that they don't want to do or they don't desire, right? For example, if you are selling the house for 2 million, for example, and then your buyer is proposing 1.5 million, but in terms of knowledge and experience, you have the power and influence. In terms of knowledge and experience, you will always try to get the person to comply with what you desired, which is 2 million, not 1.5 million. We are talking about a house in Bukit Kiara, Kuala Lumpur. Alright. So similarly, Emerson 1962 in the classic work on power defined power in terms of how dependent one party is on another. So Emerson mentioned that in defining power in negotiation, usually we will see, or we will define, alright, how a party or how a person is depending on another party in negotiating. Okay. For example, you don't have much knowledge, or you don't have much information about properties. All right. So most of the time you will be relying on your buyer to set the pace for you. How much should I pay for this? How much should I pay for maintenance? How much should I pay for the sales and purchase agreement? How much should I pay for the lawyer and things like that? All right. So basically, you will be depending solely on the person or the party that you are negotiating with. Not to say that they are making the 100% decision for you, but whatever it is being guided by the party or the person that you are negotiating with. All right. So there are two perspectives of power. Yeah. There are power used to dominate and control the other, so more likely in a distributive bargaining context, all right, whereby one will be winning, one will be losing some, and power used to work together with the other, so more likely in an integrative negotiation context, whereby you are more into a mutually agreed kind of negotiation process, all right, by Coleman 2000. All right. So the two perspective on power again. Okay, from the power holder's point of view, if you are the one who has more power and influence, all right. I prefer to use the term influence actually, because if you are using power, it sometimes you get confused between having power as in having being in a rank or having a high position. But if you define it as influence, meaning that you are being the one dominating and also influential in that negotiation process. So from the power holder's point of view, the first perspective fits the Dahl power over definition, right? So what Dahl mentioned is you want to get the other person or the other party to do things that they wouldn't do in the beginning. Okay. All right. So it fits the Dahl power over definition, implying that this power is fundamentally dominating and coercive. Right. Coercive here means that sometimes you have to use force or even threats. All right. So from the receiver's point of view, right, the other party, this use of power implies more powerlessness and more dependence on the other for outcomes. So Dell's perspective emphasize on you, all right, having influence, more influence, and getting people to do things your way, all right. And if you are the one who are being powerless, all right, you will be the one who will be depending on the other party, which has more power and influence, all right. From the second perspective, the actor's view of power suggests power with or power together, implying that the power holder they will jointly develop and share power with the other. So both of you will have the same equal amount of power and also influence. The receiver experiences this power as empowering and creating more independence. All right. So by equally distributing the power, the receiver of the effect of influence will also have a sense of you are being empowered. All right. You are being more independent and you are being more able to control one's own outcome. So both of you have your own desired outcomes, but in the end, it will be a dynamic reflection that benefits the empowerment. For example, maybe you can have a better employee participation, or maybe a broad delegation of authority, broad delegation of power, and a greater capacity to act with autonomy and personal integrity. So all of these are all the positive effect of you, okay, being, how to say this, being equal in power, and also influence dissemination between you and also the other party that you are negotiating with. Right. So looking at A is more powerful than B. This is a illustration of how power as an attribute of the actor. How do we actually prescribe power to the one who are acting or exercising the power and also influence? Okay. So A is more powerful than B. A is more influential than B. So B is quite powerless and quite depending on A. Okay. So the power of the actor in a given situation, and in the situation of A is more powerful than B, is determined by the characteristic of the situation as well as by his own characteristic. So how powerful you are, how powerless you are depends, okay, on the situation that you are in, and also the characteristic that you are displaying or you are carrying. Right. For example, number one, two, and three, if you have environmental power, okay, A is more usually able to favorably influence his overall environment and to overcome its resistance than is B. Because you have knowledge, because you have connection, because you know people, because you have been buying and selling houses for 5 years, for 10 years, for example, all right, you are much more favorable in that property buying and selling kind of environment compared to B. Okay. Relationship power, A is usually more able to influence B favorably and to overcome B's resistance than B is able to do with A. Alright. So in terms of relationship between you and also the person that you are negotiating with, you as a seller and A as a seller, for example, B as a buyer. So the relationship that you have in that particular transaction is much more favorable towards you, all right, is much more depending on you, is much more emphasizing on what you want, what you need, and how you would like the outcome to be. Because B cannot exercise their power, cannot exercise their influence on you, because of many aspects. For example, they don't have the connection, they don't have the resources, they don't have the information, they don't have the experience. Okay. Personal power, A is usually more able to satisfy his desire than is B. So this is more of a personal kind of characteristic, kind of features whereby A, him or herself, is actually someone with a very motivated, desirable kind of person. Whatever he or she want to achieve, they will achieve it. Whatever he or she want to get from this particular transaction, they will try their best to get it. Okay. So how do people acquire power? So French and Raven 1959 identified five major types of power. So number one, we have the expert power, right? Derived from having unique, in-depth information about subject. You are an expert in property for the past 10 to 15 years. You've been selling 1 year, one condominium, for example. Right? So you have the expert kind of power within you. Reward power derived by being able to reward others for doing what needs to be done. So you have the resources, all right, and you can reward people to do things, all right, according to the way that you want it to be. Okay. For example, you know that you are in the position where you will win this particular negotiation. All right. So you always assume yourself as a reward of this transaction. All right. I will sell you my house, for example, or I will be selling you this house with this price with all of these amenities. Although the price is quite expensive, for example, right? But the amenities that you can prepare, the let's say the kitchen utensils or electronic or electrical appliances or the furnitures that you are preparing, all right, is a form of reward that you are giving to your buyer. Okay. or coercive kind of power. Again, coercive is about using forces or threats, all right, derived by being able to punish others for not doing what needs to be done. So in terms of punishment, sorry, looking at this kind of negotiation, buying and selling a condominium, so the punishment would be, let's say, if you don't want to pay me 1 million, I would have to sell this to those who are willing to. Or for example, if you want to cut the price down from 2 million to 1.5 million, I will have to remove all the furniture from the house. Or if you want to cut the deal from 2 million to 1.5 million, you will have to bear all the costing of the sales and purchase document, legal fees, insurance and everything on your own. 1.5 million is just what will I get. It's just my personal reward. The others, you will have to bear them on your own. So this is some form of punishment or threats that you can imply on the people that you are negotiating with. Okay, and then legitimate power derived from holding an office or a formal title in some organization and using the power that are associated with that office. For example, you are the vice president of Sime Dhabi, or you are the director of the property division of what's famous in Kelantan, SBJ, PKINK, PMBK, for example. Alright, so because you are in that particular office having that particular title, alright, you know that people doesn't have that authority or doesn't have much influence to negotiate and get the outcome that they desire from you. Okay, and then reference power derived from the respect or admiration one commands because of attributes like personality, integrity, and interpersonal style. So reference power refer to you as being a person who is very well known in this particular field, or very well known to be quite a successful trader of, do we call it as trader? Maybe property developer or something, all right? So A, for example, A is said to have reference power over B to the extent that B identified with or wants to be closely associated with A. So when you are having this kind of reference, people are referring to you as having, let's buy house from Sir Wan because he knows a lot about the properties in Kelantan. He knows a lot about the market, where to buy, where to sell, where got flood, where don't have flood, or something like that. So whatever it is that he is saying, I will agree with him. Whatever price that he offered, I will certainly follow that particular outcome. So that is an example of reference power. But then nowadays, okay, most of the what you call that, throughout the years, right? Many contemporary discussion of power are still grounded in this typology. Okay, meaning that they are still referring to these particular terms. But nowadays, Revan has elaborated the typology or the terminology several times since it was first proposed. So it was actually originally proposed in 1959, but then throughout the years, Revan himself has already come up with more redefined and also clear measure of how people acquire power. So number one, informational source of power. People can also acquire power by power based on personality and individual differences. And then we have power based on position in an organization, or you can call it as structural power, and then relationship based source of power, and then contextual source of power. All right. So number one, informational source of power. So we know that when we have information, we will acquire the accumulation and presentation of data intended to change the other person's point of view or position on of an issue. Right. So in a transaction process, in a negotiation process, because you acquire all the information, all the data of where to buy, where to sell, where is the best place to build houses, where is the best place to buy houses, good for rental, good to settle down, or things like that. All right. So you will have tend to acquire the informational source of power. So it can be in terms of information, it can be in terms of proper expertise. All right. And also expertise power can also be positive, right? We believe the other because of her acknowledged expertise, or even negative. We so distrust the other that her claim expertise leads us to pursue a course of action opposite the one she advocates, right? So sometimes it can be positive because he know a lot in the property field, so we need to follow whatever it is he's saying. It can also be negative because he knows a lot about property, where to buy, where to sell, which the best, or what are the best price, which is the best place to settle down, which is the best place to get good rent. All right, we will not tend to follow him because we will think that he will be charging us he will be charging us or putting very undesirable or unnegotiable kind of prices. Okay, because you do know that sometimes good services come with quite an expensive price. Okay. And then number two source of power is personality and individual differences. All right. So power derived from differences in terms of psychological orientation, meaning that you have a broad orientation to power use. You already know how to psychologically utilize power and influence towards the others. You also have the cognitive orientation, whereby you always try to learn and have new ideologies about how to use the power, how to exercise your influence on the people that you are negotiating with, and motivational orientation, whereby you do have specific motive to use your power. You do have your desire. By the end of this year, I want to achieve 1 million of sale in terms of property, for example. This position and skills orientation to cooperation or competition. All right. So personally or individually, all right, you are more of a person who would like to cooperate, or you are more of a person who would like to compete in achieving your goal. All right. And then your moral orientation, the philosophical orientation to power use. All right. Whether you think that it is ethical to use a bit of power or influence when you are negotiating, or do you think that you need to express yourself, you need to be excessive in terms of power and also influence exercise on the other person. And also it depends on moods and disposition, how you are feeling at that time, how does the market at that time affects how you would like to get the best outcome of that out of that transaction. Right, we also have the position-based power. Right, this is almost the same as where you held an office or a position in a very particular good organization, for example. So power derived from being located in a particular position in an organizational or communication structure leads to several different kinds of leverage. Okay, several different kinds of influences that you can practice. Number one, some people they have legitimate power, or maybe some form of formal authority derived from occupying a key position in a hierarchical organization. Right, so you are holding a very high kind of position, or you are holding, like, let's say, sales manager, or chief executive sales officer, for example, or maybe um, a chief sales manager kind of thing. All right. So, however, legitimate power can also influence social norms. Okay. Sometimes when you have very high legitimate power in an organization, you will also influence the social norms that you are living in. For example, reciprocity or the expected exchange of favors. So you will have a certain kind of outcome, or certain kind of, how to put this, KPI, key performance index, that you would like to achieve, but at the same time, okay, you also want to exchange things with others for mutual benefit. So by getting this deal done, you will not only get the best, or the most, or the most benefit out of this negotiation, but you will also would like to gain, for example, friendship, or have good relationship, or have good reputation with your clients. Okay, equity or the expected return after one has gone out of one's way for the other. All right, so you want to achieve something in return. All right, when you are exercising power and also influence and dependence, all right, of the expected obligation one owes to others who cannot help themselves. For example, you would like to be perceived as someone who others would like to refer to, who would like to depend to, or someone who will be a point of reference when they are buying properties, if you are talking about buying properties. Okay. And number two, the resource control or the accumulation of money, raw materials, labor, time, and equipment that can be used as incentive to encourage compliance, or it can also be used as punishment for non-compliance. Because we know that the resources that you have, right, the control over resources that you have can be manifested in terms of, number one, reward power, the use of tangible reward or personal approval to gain the other's compliance. So when you are negotiating, all right, if they tend to pay you, let's say, you are offering 2 million, they're asking 1.5 million, you will always have all the resources like money, material, labor, equipment to, let's say, reduce the quality from 2 million to 1.5 million. All right, or if they are complying to 2 million, for example, you can always reward them by giving them a good quality, finishing the project by time, or maybe ahead of time, or maybe giving them, let's say, extra finishing or extra touch towards the lot or the unit that they are buying from you. Or it can also be in terms of punishment power, like I mentioned just now. You can be using your resources to downgrade the quality, or maybe you just taking the job slightly and not completing the project within time. Okay, and also power based on location in a network structure. All right. So sometimes in exercising power and influence, you doesn't have to be a person who is the top management or who is the second person, first person, president, vice president, or chief executive officer or something. It can also be a person who is in charge of certain particular department in that particular organization. For example, let's say in the Gili campus, all right, when they want to buy chemicals, they want to buy laboratory kind of equipment, they will have to go through the science officer or pegawai science. So these science officers, they will sign what you call that, your LO. They will sign, they will decide what are the things that need to be equipped in the lab and things like that. So if you don't have this particular person, or if you don't have good relation, or if they are accessing or using excessive power over you, they will tend to maybe hold the process, for example, or maybe they will tend to get more out of the transaction or out of the negotiation that you are doing. Okay, and then relationship based power, it can be goal interdependence, whereby the parties view the interrelatedness of their goals. So usually this will be in terms of those who are trying to get a mutual kind of outcome from that particular transaction. Or it can be reference power, okay, based on an appeal to other, based on common experience, group membership status, and etc. For example, you are always referred as someone who is very influential, who is very uh, have a lot of experience, been selling houses for 10 years, for example. So being a point of reference in this particular field has made you to have excessive power and also influence to the parties that you will be negotiating with. Right? But then reference power can also be positive. All right, we believe the other because we respect him, or it can also be negative, whereby we so disrespect the other that we pursue a course of action opposite the one he advocates. Meaning that because you know of his reputation, you tend to be disrespectful, not because you do not like the person. Maybe he is well known for a bad reputation, for example, or maybe you yourself envy the reputation that they have, so you will tend to do things which is opposing to the things that he or she is proposing or always practice. Okay, and then last but not least, we have the contextual power, right? Power derived from the context in which the negotiation takes place. For example, you're going to have common sources of contextual power, which include the availability of partners or best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Okay, I'm going to offer you 2 billion. All right, you want it for 1.5 million? All right, what about I make it as 1.8 million? All right, but then I'm also going to offer you full bedroom furniture, and also I'm gonna give you 2 units of aircons in your bedrooms as well. All right. So the best alternative to a negotiated agreement will be your last bullet that you want to get the person uh, to agree with the deal that you are working on. All right. Organizational and national culture. All right. Whether your culture, the culture of your organization or the culture of the country that you are living in allow you, all right, for example, um, to negotiate in a term that you can increase the price from 1.5 million to 2 million, or is there a requirement whereby you have a ceiling price or a limit where you can increase the price of properties? If yes, then you are very lucky. If no, then maybe the person can always increase the price whenever he wanted to, because he has the power and influence to do so. All right. Availability of agents, okay, constituencies, and audience who can directly or indirectly affect the outcome of the negotiation. So constituencies are a group of people with shared experience or shared kind of interest. For example, when you are looking for a new apartment, you are a first time buyer, so you will always get you will, let's say if you have a friend which is a lawyer, you will bring a friend who is a lawyer to give advices in terms of legal kind of advisors, or you can have people who have been buying houses, 2 to 3 houses, your good friend, your siblings, for example, to come and evaluate the situation or the negotiation that you are having, uh, whether it is very, it is mutually beneficial, or it is more of giving the other party the benefits and giving you the benefit of doubt. Okay. All right. So what will be the consequences of unequal power? So we know that the person with more power will have the capacity to control his or her own and the other's outcome more than the person with less power. So if you have more power and influence, you will have the capacity not just to control, all right, the outcome from what you want, but also control the outcome from what the other person or the other party wanted as well. Okay. So differences in power and in level of interdependence between parties, okay, differences inequality in power will lead to significantly different conflict orientation and also behavior. For example, maybe you will try to avoid making things worse, right? Or maybe you will just leave the negotiation, exit the relationship, or maybe you will hinder the other's action, or maybe you will do things which is very undesirable, or maybe rather than being winning and losing kind of situation, why not both of us lose in terms of the outcome. Okay. And then parties with equal power are more likely to engage in cooperative behavior, while parties with unequal power are more likely to behave contentiously using threats, punishment, and exploitative behavior. So if you are more practicing equal power, equal kind of influence in your negotiation process, all right, okay, you will be in a very cooperative kind of behavior or situation. But if you think that you want to be more powerful, you want to access more power, more influence on the other person, right, sometimes you will behave in a way that will be very unpleasant. For example, you will be using threats, punishment. If you give me 1.5 million, I'm gonna take away all the furniture, I'm gonna take away all the aircon units, for example, and you will try to be exploitative. Okay. The more powerful party in the relationship has the capacity to determine the negotiation outcome, regardless of the source of power, regardless of you having personal resources, relationship-based power, position, what else, informational kind of power, regardless of the resources that you have. Okay, if you are more powerful, if you are more influential, you will have the capacity to determine the outcome. All right. Powerful parties may actually decide to withhold the use of that power. Sometimes, although you realize that you are the one who will be winning, all right, the agreement or the negotiation, you will be withholding your power because you know that if you use it, the lower party will be less involved in creating the outcome. Okay, sometimes there are negotiators who would like to just be dependent on you. Whatever it is that you said, you want it to be based on let's say the person or the party that you are referring to. But sometimes there are also party or person who want to have a mutually kind of agreement whereby they just don't want to be blamed at the end of the negotiation process. So whatever it is, we have to take responsibility if the outcome is very desirable. But then if the outcome is a lose-lose kind of situation, we didn't achieve the outcome that both of us wanted, then both of us will have to bear the cost and also will have to experience the loss in this negotiation process. Okay. All right. Done with that one. Any question on this one? Any question on finding and using negotiating power?
No,
All right. What about the assignment? How's the assignment going on? Is it hard? Is it fun to be done? Sorry?
Still ongoing.
Still ongoing.
In
Okay, don't
progress.
worry. In progress. Okay. All right. It's kind of, it's not a straightforward kind of assignment actually, because you will need to assess, okay, the field of negotiation in an imaginary or experience based kind of negotiation process. So you can always imagine a situation whereby you're gonna have A, B, C, D, and E in that whole particular process. All right. So I'm not gonna say that it is something that you cannot search in the internet. Actually, it is something that you need to imagine, or you need to recap based on your experience. Okay. All right. So I think if there's no more question about that, you can always ask me later in the group or personally, or you can always post a question in our group for all of us to discuss with. Okay. So I think that's all for tonight. Thank you very much for joining. I'm going to stop presenting. All right. Okay. So I guess I'll see you again next week. All right. Assalamualaikum and have a very good night, everyone. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you.
Thank
All
you,
right.
sir.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Good night. Bye
Good
bye. Good night,
night.
everyone.